the process of transformation, and most people don't know there is real healing that can happen. Like real healing can happen. I said it's not permanent, but you can release the trauma energy. And in order to release the trauma energy, we need to, the part that holds the trauma needs to share its experience. Now, that could be internally through meditation. That can be with a therapist, or that can be with an intimate partner. And sharing the experience is not sharing the story. It's sharing the thoughts, the feelings, and the physical sensations around the trauma.
Hello, my friends, and welcome to this episode of Let's Talk Love. I'm so excited to be joined by our guest, Dr. Frank Anderson. Dr. Frank is a trauma expert. And, there is so much, I would say, I know you would agree with me, Dr. Frank, around the fact that there is this collective consciousness. There is so much discussion and awareness and talk and education around trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And you've been doing this work for decades. You are Harvard educated. You're a doctor of your psychiatry, and you work with people around trauma. You've got an institute that you've developed, but I would just say in the last, I don't know, in my thinking, it's like the last 5 years, 6, 7 years, like the trauma talk is so big in our world.
Yes.
And so I'm just excited to have this discussion with you today. And thank you for joining us on Let's Talk Love, Dr. Frank Anderson.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I do. I want to say something right off the bat around this. It's an interesting thing around the awareness that you're talking about, and that within the last 5 or so years, like, oh, by the way, the whole world was traumatized. Like, it really does help awareness.
Oh my gosh.
Right?
Of course.
It helps.
Like COVID? Are you kidding me right now? Like the whole world was shut.
Right.
Like you think about that.
Yeah. So that awareness is somewhat related to that because, people say, does everybody have a trauma history? I'm like, well, if you lived through COVID, yes, we do. Right. So there is this growing awareness, which I think is super important. And, I was watching the way the waves and the ebbs and the flows, and people got numb and dissociated. They got freaked out and hyper aroused, like all the stuff, and we haven't really recovered from it. And we don't know how to be in the world. People, we learned how to quarantine. We didn't learn how to come out of a trauma. And people have really struggling with that. People are struggling with that, in my opinion. And there is this paradox. So the trauma awareness is much more prevalent in our culture and society. And there's still an allergy out in the general public, like, that's not me. That didn't happen to me. Those are for weak people. Like, it's really interesting because I have this production company now bringing trauma stories to the general public, and what we're finding, which is fascinating, I wouldn't have known this, is like, there's many shows, The Bear, for people who have watched The Bear.
Oh, my boyfriend and I love that show.
Right?
Yeah.
Ted Lasso, for kids, Stranger Things. These are all trauma shows. They're all about trauma, but the word trauma is never mentioned. The word trauma is never mentioned. So
and it's misunderstood.
Yes. People have this fascination with it, but also this allergy. Yes, it exists. I think the Me Too movement, Black Lives Matter, both of those things also brought trauma awareness to the general public, seeing that on TV and seeing it through social media. So yes, you're right. Awareness is much greater, and I want to be a part of that. And there's still this vulnerability to acknowledging and admitting that you have it that people are struggling with. And, it's part of why I wrote this memoir. Is like, okay, like, here you go. Here it is. Like, it's, even the quote trauma expert has a trauma history. Let me tell you all about it. I really want to normalize that experience because everybody I know has had some form of overwhelming experience. I don't know anybody who hasn't had some.
We've all We've all had it. And
Yes.
so this was, you talk about this at the beginning of your book. So your
Yeah.
book that you're speaking of is called To Be Loved,
Yeah.
and it is a memoir, right?
Yes.
So you've already written. You're like a 2 times best-selling
Yeah.
author of 2 books already on trauma, and
Yes.
this one was like, did you not say it was like your colleagues were like, listen, Frank, you gotta write it. All right. It's like you have to tell the story of how you
I
actually became a trauma expert and why
yes.
you actually got into this field, because it really is
Yeah.
when you tell your story,
Yes.
this is the reason that you're on this life's path, is
100%.
because you've lived through, like, you lived through a childhood of trauma.
Yes. That's
Like
exactly right.
the story that this and your vulnerability and what you shared, it's beautiful, really,
Mm.
and how powerful it is to share our stories so that we
Yeah.
can learn from each other and heal through that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so can you tell us, please, like, give a synopsis of like why you wrote your book?
Yeah.
And yes, please.
Yeah. It was one of those. I was kind of surprised. Like I've never even really thought of myself as an author, which is kind of strange, having written 3 books now and working on a fourth
Right,
already.
because you're like, no, I'm a doctor of psychiatry and a
Yeah, and I know
psychotherapist. Like, I'm not
I
an
know I'm
author.
a good teacher. Like that, I know I'm a good teacher,
You
but
are a good teacher.
I didn't think that I'd be teaching through writing, through storytelling in that way. So when my publisher, right after Transcending Trauma, which was my second book, came out, right after, they're like, we think you should, I thought they were going to call a meeting to see how well the book was doing, right? That's what I'm like, oh, they like, let's have a meeting. I'm like, great. And I thought it was going to be like a recap on the sales of the book. And they're like, we want you to write a memoir. And I was like, what? Like, what? Like, really?
Really?
Yeah, and I was really surprised by that. They're like, "Look, Frank, you through snippets of your personal experience in transcending trauma. We think you people would really be interested in hearing your story." And I kind of didn't take me long to be like, "Yes, I want to do this," because there is this us and them. Like I'm the expert, you're the patient. Like dynamic. I don't like. I really don't like that. So to even the playing field and to kind of talk about my trauma history, I thought was going to be a great offering for people, and I have this purpose, I'll say, to bring trauma healing to the world. And it's not my purpose. It's a higher purpose. It's not mine.
Well, you say it's your mission.
It's my mission. It's my
Yes, it
purpose.
is.
And I thought this would be a good way to do that. What I was not expecting was how much healing it was for me to write the book.
Yourself.
I did not. I was like, this is for people. I've been in therapy for 30 years. Like I know my story. You know what I mean? So
Oh my gosh.
I wasn't expecting the layers and levels of stuff that got put together and processed through writing a book. I had this thought in my head writing all the time was like the moments that made me, that kept showing up.
Oh,
The
wow.
moments that made me, the moments that made me. And I thought everybody has moments. Like we
We
all
all
have
have,
we
and we all, like, I can think about it right now,
right?
Frank. I can think
Right?
about like those moments
Yes.
that I'm like, oh, remember that, Robin? Like,
Yes.
that is like, we all
Yes.
have those that are so pivotal in,
Yes.
like, and they might, like, I'm thinking about the sting. I'm like,
Some of them are big, like weddings and funerals and all that kind
yeah,
of
but
stuff.
no,
Babies,
actually, I think more of them are like the
right?
ones that are like the ones that you don't want to talk about, that actually you have not shared.
I'll tell you one such moment that got put together in writing this book. Like this was like, oh my God, I had no idea. So like when I was in medical school, I was doing a child psych rotation. And we're doing a
Hmm.
rotation on child psychiatry. I loved children. I thought, oh my God, I'm going to be a child psychiatrist. This is perfect. And so I was in the rotation and we took the kids out on the playground. I picked up this little girl and put her on the swing. She's like, would you
Oh
put me
my
on the swing?
gosh. You
Right?
tell this on
She's
in your book.
I'm like, she's like, will you pick me up and put me on the swing? I'm like, sure, honey. And I put her on the swing. And then a week later, I get kicked out of the rotation. They're like, somebody's filed a complaint about you. You're out of medical school until further notice. Like I was devastated by it. I was traumatized. And we can't tell you what it is. Like we
Of
can't
course.
tell you because it's secret.
And you have
Go
no
home.
idea. You're
I had
like,
no
what the
idea.
hell did I like? I didn't do anything wrong. You're
Right.
going like I've been like a stellar student. I've been
Yeah,
like doing like you're oh
I had
God.
no idea. And then 4 weeks later, they come back and say, let's have a conversation. And they're like, hey, our bad. It was a total mistake. Like, our bad. Like, hello, this traumatized the hell out of me. But they're like, this little girl
Hmm.
whose mother was a trauma specialist
Right.
felt neglected by her mother. So she made up a story so that she can get her
Hmm.
mother's attention. Right.
Right. That you were
That
acting
this boy,
inappropriately.
this man touched me inappropriately. Right. Because I picked her up and put her on the swing. So she was
Hmm.
looking for love and attention from her mother. Plain and simple.
Wow.
Right.
At
And
your you
at
think about that,
my
right?
career was almost over. Like, I almost lost my whole career, which was the way I was looking for love and attention. Like, my whole life
Oh my
was
gosh,
being
Frank.
smart.
Oh.
That's what it was like. Like, I was like, oh my
Mm.
goodness, this girl and I have so much in common. Even though she almost destroyed my career, we're both in search of love from our parents. And she
Hmm.
does it one way and I do it another way. And our paths crossed in that moment. And that was a moment. That was one of those moments. Like, and they're like, go back into your program and we're going to give you high honors and don't worry about it. It's all fine. Like, was like, it took me a while to recover from that. But in writing the memoir, that was one of those moments I said, we all have so much more in common
Then we have
than we are
differences. So
different, you know? And
can
even
I
this
ask you?
girl who I could hate because she said this horrible
No,
lie about me. I'm
no.
like,
She was
my
a
goodness,
6-year-old girl who you
well,
lifted onto the
we
swing.
had so much in common.
No, of course
Yes,
you did. Okay, so
yes,
it was through writing the book
yes,
and reflection, and that's where you actually put that connection together.
yes, that's it. I
That's
never had
amazing.
that. I never had that. There was so many
Yeah.
moments like that I put together through writing that book. I was like, oh wow, because writing is different than talking. It you
Oh
have
yeah.
you can't
Yeah.
write as quickly as you think, so it forces you to slow down
Oh yeah.
and to
So
be with things differently. So it was very therapeutic for me. And I'll tell you this. I'll say one other thing about it. In all my years of therapy, I never had the moments of healing with my father as I did towards the end of his life while
yeah.
I was writing the book. So I was writing the book in real time. So the
Oh.
last 4 chapters of the book were written in real time. So things would happen, I'd write it. It was an incredible experience. So even all my therapy didn't kind of bring me to the same place as my life did while I was kind of writing this memoir and my dad was failing. It was so powerful, the healing that happened towards the end of his life. No, none of the therapy in the world could have done what those moments together between him and I did.
Oh, well, of course not. And I think, well, I say of course not. But the reason I say that, Frank, is because what you are teaching us and is that I think there's this misunderstanding around therapy
Yes.
that you're going to go into this therapist's office and you're going to be healed. You're going to learn from the expert. You're going to somehow
Yeah.
absorb
Yeah.
the healing and
All the
walk out
wisdom.
healed.
Yeah. All the
That's not
wisdom.
what happens,
No.
right?
No.
What I
No.
know from my own experience and
Yeah.
are what you are doing as a therapist and also teaching and writing about and sharing
Yeah.
is that you are given tools
Yes.
so
Yeah.
that when you're in your own life, it's like, okay, I'm going to act this way with
Yeah.
what I've learned. I'm going
Yeah.
to act differently this time. I'm
Yes.
going to really embody the learning.
Yeah.
That is very different. Like you're not absorbing some healing. That's not the way
Yes.
that work. That's not the way life works.
No.
So it's just
There's a
like, no,
release. Here's the way I think about it. There's the release of what we're carrying. There is the work of releasing the trauma energy. So
yes,
trauma is energy and we carry it, right? And so there is a process of releasing that
hmm,
energy.
okay, yeah,
And
yep, yep,
and that is not the end of the story. Then there is a showing up in your life differently and what I call corrective experiences. Like I'm going to do this differently. I'm going to speak up differently. I'm
Great.
not going to be passive this time, you know? So it is what happens in therapy that's important. And it doesn't end there. It's like prepares you to show up differently in life. That's one of the things that I'm working on is having people do episodic therapy treatment. Do 5 sessions, do 10 sessions, then live your life and work it until you've mastered it. And then
Oh
go
my
back,
gosh, I love that.
right? And
Work
then
it.
go back and do a second piece of work. Because what ends up happening is sometimes people slip into therapy and just like you said, Robin, like, oh, you're gonna give me all the answers. It's what we do when we're in a marriage or something with a partner. You're gonna heal me. You're gonna give me everything I needed, right? No, that doesn't happen either. Doesn't
Mm-mm.
happen. It's like I'm gonna live life differently with what I've learned in this experience. And so I really believe people need real life experiences, and I I mentioned this briefly in the Instagram a little bit, like being with angry men has been very hard for me my whole life because of my history with my father. And to truly show up differently when a man is angry in my life, even in all the therapy I've done, is still challenging.
Of course
Not
it is.
better at
So
it.
can you give us can you share that please, Frank? Okay, I want to let's just talk about this in real time.
Yeah,
You've had you've experienced with your you grew up with a dad who was
yeah,
completely volatile.
yeah,
He would come home from, he was a pharmacist and
yes,
running his pharmacy
yeah,
like
yeah,
17, 18 hours a day,
yes, totally,
right?
totally.
He would leave in the morning before he woke up and come
Yeah,
home at night, and then
yeah,
he'd have a martini,
yeah.
like try to,
You,
you're in bed with your brother,
yeah.
and there was just so much, you shared so much. Like I
That
just,
was
I
that
really,
was another moment, like because
oh,
my brother and I used to scream, right? La, la.
can we talk about this, Frank? So this is what I really want to bring this up. I don't think people understand what trauma bonding means.
Yes,
This is what you and your brother, not
totally.
just you and your brother were doing. When your
So
dad would
trauma
come
bonded.
home from the
Yes,
pharmacy and he was exhausted and he was having a drink to whatever his habit was to
yeah,
decompress and be
yeah.
like, oh, that was a long frickin' day.
We were
But you
kids.
hadn't seen your dad because you're like, we never see him, but we
We
love
never
him and
see.
he's our dad.
Right.
So then you would act up in
Yes.
order to get his attention. And you're
Yes.
like, so you would be negative. Like, can you please educate us on
Negative.
what that
We
means?
used to. We had. It was a game. We had this game, and we'd be screaming and yelling, and he'd yell, "Shut up, you sons of bitches!" He
Yeah.
one more word, and I'm going to come up there and give you something to scream about. We'd look at each
And
other,
I understand that. Like,
right,
I could hear my parents saying that to me
right,
sometimes when
right.
I was
One
little,
more
for
time,
sure.
I'll give you
Like, you
something
say,
to scream
you
about.
little rascals. Like,
Yeah,
I'm going to freaking give you
yeah,
something to scream about.
yeah.
Yeah.
And we'd look at each other literally and be like, "Okay, it's go time." Like, how crazy is that? Like, and
Yeah.
that was one of the
It
things is
worked.
writing. Negative attention is better than no attention at all. Negative attention, and so here we did. We're like, "Ah, ah, ah." We screamed again. We knew he'd come up. He came up to the room, flew open the door, ripped off. We put like layers of covers. We're like, he's not gonna get us. He won't hurt us. Like we put like 5 or 6 blankets and we tucked them in under the mattress, thinking as kids like, oh, we protected ourselves. And like with one swoop, he rips off all the covers and smacks us,
Yeah. Gives
and
you a
hits
spanking.
me and then hits my brother, and then he leaves. And we were kind of like mission
It
accomplished.
worked.
It worked in that way. Like, this is what people don't understand. Why would you be in an abusive relationship when, like, tension is better than neglect?
Oh my goodness.
Even
Oh my
if,
goodness. Right.
even
Like,
if
Frank,
it's
like,
negative.
oh, wow.
That's right.
So can we, this is, I really would like to go through the 4 things that you are helping and teaching us around healing trauma. Okay.
Yeah.
So what are they and how do we do it?
Yeah. So
Because
this
it's
is
like
part
we
of,
all have stuff. This is what we're talking about. We're talking
yes.
about the fact that And obviously, like there's some of us that have like so much more,
Yep. Yep.
right? And
The
I pray
process.
to God that those listeners that are on this call or listening can access like professional help if you need
Yeah.
it and can, you know, and this is
Mhm.
what you're doing, Frank.
Yep.
But how can we, if we like, or just how do we do it on our own? Like, what are the steps?
Yeah. So I have a kind of called the four T's to trauma healing. And I'm creating a workbook. I'm creating a new textbook to go in depth around this subject so that people can understand how to kind of do a program for themselves and then get help as they need it, right? But
Mm-hmm.
first is thank your trauma responses. Like people don't understand that their behavior
You're saying
that they
thank.
thank thank your trauma responses because they're there to protect you, right? People don't
Hmm.
understand that drinking, cutting, suicidality, depression, panic, yelling at your kids, having an affair, binging and purging are all protective responses. They are trying to keep the pain away inside.
Hmm.
That's their best attempt at keeping pain away. So we don't hate our responses, we appreciate them for what they're trying to do.
Hmm.
This opens the door and it changes your internal world. Instead of being critical and self loathing, you start being appreciative. Then these parts are willing to work with you. They're much more amenable to cooperate and be collaborative. Next
How do
is,
you, how do you think those parts? Like,
yeah,
you're like, it's awareness. You're like going like,
it's the
I see this.
curiosity. It's like, oh, so drinking is really there. You ask, what's your role? You ask the part that drinks. You know, like, why are you doing this? Why is it important? Because if we didn't drink, we'd be suicidal. Or because if we didn't drink, you might hear, we'd feel how alone and miserable we really are. Drinking gets us away from feeling lonely. Oh, thank you so much. I get it. You know, you have to
Hmm.
understand the intention.
Hmm.
So you ask the part that's drinking or cutting or suicidal, instead of trying to get rid of it, move toward it and get
Hmm.
curious about it. Then you need to you need to be aware, have awareness that you know what's right. You have intuition, you have wisdom. So I say, connect to your truth and wisdom. You'll have the truth inside of you. That truth has been disconnected because of trauma. We lose connection to our instincts and our intuition for survival. Like as a kid, I had to disconnect with what I knew my parents were doing wrong, and I had to attach to them for survival because I needed them for survival. So
Yep.
we disconnect from our intuition in the service of survival. So the second is retrust your wisdom, your intuition. People know what's right. Kids know what's right, even if they don't act that way. So you
Mm-hmm.
reconnect to your own wisdom, not listening to somebody else's or relying on
I, I,
somebody else to give you the
I
answer.
think that we touched on this earlier, Frank,
Yeah,
around we've got our therapists, we've got our teachers, we've got our mentors, we've got
yeah.
people that we are like, turning
Guru.
to for the right advice, the
Yeah.
guru. It's like, no.
No.
I
Here's the
mean, as
guru.
adults, I mean, it's like you said, like as even just as people, we
Yeah.
have the wisdom inside of
We have
us.
it. Yeah.
And no, you don't need to look outside yourself
Yeah.
for the actually the answer.
That's right. That's right.
Well, and that right in itself is
Huge.
takes practice and
Yeah.
takes like, but it's like actually we know the right answer.
Yes. You know how many times I've worked with people who are like ending a marriage and they'll say stuff like, I was walking down the aisle in my dress and I knew this was a mistake, but I did it anyway. Or I saw how disconnected my wife was. My fiance was at the time. I knew she didn't have the capacity to truly love me, but I married her anyways. Like we have
Oh, like
wisdom and
Frank, you tell a story about when you were married to your wife.
Yeah,
before Michael,
totally.
right?
Totally.
Hello, like, and I think the same thing. My second marriage, it was a total like
Right?
I knew from like there were so many red flags beyond,
Right.
and I'm like,
Right.
but I still went through with it. I
Didn't
mean,
you?
am I surprised that I ended up with a second divorce?
Right.
What the hell? I mean,
Exactly.
come on.
That's exactly right.
This is like
Exactly right.
what we do
We
this to
ignore our
ourselves. I don't
wisdom.
know.
We ignore our
Yeah.
wisdom to keep an external connection.
Oh yeah.
We ignore our wisdom to keep like the connection is more important than our truth. And
The connection
that's a
is more
result of
important than our
trauma.
truth, and that is
The
something
trauma
that
response.
Gabor Mate talks about, right?
You
And he
got
teaches is like authenticity versus
yeah.
attachment, and how
100%.
we are very very afflicted by that.
Yeah.
We
Yes.
spear. So what's
Then there's
that?
transforming your trauma. Then there's
Yeah.
the fourth T is transforming your trauma. And the process of transformation, and most people don't know there is real healing that can happen. Like real healing can happen. I said it's not permanent, but you can release the trauma energy. And in order to release the trauma energy, we need to, the part that holds the trauma needs to share its experience. Now, that could be internally through meditation, that can be with a therapist, or that can be with an intimate partner. And sharing the experience is not sharing the story. It's sharing the thoughts, the feelings, and the physical sensations around the trauma. So it's
Can you please
sharing the,
repeat that, Frank?
yeah,
The part that
the
holds
part
the
that
trauma.
holds the trauma needs to share it first with someone before it can heal. It
Hmm.
needs to not be the only holder of the information.
Okay.
It's like, you know it now, so I'm not the only one that holds it. Whether it shares it with the adult you, whether it shares it with a therapist, whether it's somebody, So it's got to be shared, and not just the story, the whole experience. Then
Hmm.
there needs to be a corrective experience. The part that holds the trauma needs to feel the opposite of the trauma. For example, I'm unlovable, it needs to feel loved. I'm worthless, it needs to feel worthy. I don't matter, it needs to feel like it's matter.
So can you give us can you give us an example, please,
Yeah,
of
sure.
yeah.
I mean, I can tell you, this was what I was working on recently with these kind of angry men in my life. I was like, what was in common, I told you, is they all adored me in the beginning of our relationship, right? They all had this adoration for me. And I was like, I don't need adoration from outside people. I love you, meaning the little me, little Frankie. I love myself. Like, I don't need that from elsewhere because the healing has occurred, and it's true. It's not arrogant. It's like, I love myself. I'm actually worth it. Like, I deserve. I never felt that way
Yes.
before. I never felt
And what is adoration anyways, Frank? It's like,
it's
is
about
that
them. Like,
authentic?
I'm learning.
Is it
No, it was
real?
about
Is
them.
it
It
mm,
was, they can be in association with me if they give me all these great compliments. Cause then it's like, oh my God, I'm connected to Frank Anderson. You know what I mean?
you don't need to be
So
adored. It's just like
no,
appreciate and love
I
for who
used
you
to.
are. Like that's the
I
truth,
used
right?
to,
Like
but that was the healing. I used to
mm,
need to be adored outside because I didn't feel it inside.
mm,
So I was searching for it. You know what I mean? And I'm not searching for it anymore. It's
no,
like, look, I do love myself. I am worth it. And if you don't like me, like, it's okay. That's your issue. You don't
yeah.
have to like me. I like me now. So that corrective experience where the part of me that felt unloved, it's the whole reason of to be loved, feels loved now. It feels loved. Little Frankie inside
Mm.
feels worth it and valued and loved because of the corrective experiences that he's had with me in my healing journey. So there's a corrective experience that needs to happen. Then release is possible. Then the trauma energy can be released because trauma energy is not ours. It's what we absorbed. So
Oh
once you
gosh.
share the story and then you have a corrective experience, you can release that energy that isn't yours in the first place,
Oh my
and
goodness. I like that right there, I think is
well,
I think that's like such a huge understanding.
yeah,
Well, I was talking to my best friend, Kirsten. She
Yeah.
works with Real Love Ready, and
Yeah.
we work on our podcast together. And we
Yeah.
were talking about your book all week. And
Mm.
we're like, what'd you think about this? What'd you think about that? Like,
Yeah.
thank goodness I've got like somebody to talk to
Yeah.
about our
Yep.
learnings, right?
Yep.
And what did
100.
we take away from your book? And we were talking about forgiveness.
Well,
This is a heavy one.
this is the last T, is take back your power. Like once you've released your
Yeah.
trauma energy, then it's take back your power and choose to forgive the person who harmed you or not. Like forgiveness is a choice, right? But if you choose it, not you're forced to do it, because so much of culture and society forces forgiveness prematurely.
Or
I
like
say
religiously. We were talking
totally,
about like, I
totally.
was raised Catholic, and it's just like,
That's right. So
Jesus
is
is on the cross. I mean,
that's
Robin,
right.
if Jesus
Yeah.
could do it, you could do it. You know? Come on.
Right? Exactly. Exactly. We heard it so often. And this is more like forgiveness is actually for you, not for the person you're forgiving. That you release the energy you're carrying about what they did to you.
So
You're
this is
releasing.
so Frank, let's talk
Yeah.
about this, okay?
Yes.
I really, because I like with Kirsten and I, we really went into this. We're like, okay, what about this example? What about this? Like, it
Yeah.
doesn't, because people have been, I mean, hello,
Yes.
like you could
Yeah.
think about the atrocities that another
Yes.
human being can inflict. Your dad
100%.
beat you,
Yes.
okay? Your
Yes.
parents sent you off to
Yeah.
conversion therapy from a
Right.
very young age. Like they thought they knew that you were gay.
Right.
You
100%.
didn't know,
Right.
but right from a very conscious point of view, you didn't
Yeah.
know as a little boy, but
Not
they
at
were like, "Oh,
all.
he's showing all the
No,
signs
no,
that he might be, so let's send him
no.
off to therapy every week
Exactly.
to try to fix him." I mean,
Right.
you think about all the things that
Yeah.
happen to human beings, and you're like,
But here's the
"Okay,
thing. I carried anger and resentment for years.
yeah, I know,
That was hurting me.
yes,
Forgiveness was not letting them off the hook.
no,
Forgiveness
you're not
was
condoning."
forgiveness or condoning. No, forgiveness was I'm no longer carrying this energy about you. It was
Right.
freedom. It was freedom for me. And you know what was shocking is when I really experienced forgiveness, I started loving my father, which was
Yes, you talk
so
about this because
right.
your dad was in stages of his life,
Yes, and I
and
felt
you
love
were
for him.
taking care of him,
Yeah,
and he did actually change his behavior towards
yes,
you, and he was right. Like it was a beautiful end
yes, yeah.
to
It
his
was like a Hollywood ending, but it was actually
right.
my life. It was such a gift.
Yeah.
It was such a gift to have that. So I was freed of all the stuff. I was freed of my trauma because I've done a lot of my own work. But then I was freed of all the feelings I had toward him, which was a
Yeah.
bonus. Do you know what I mean? I was not expecting that.
No.
It's huge. It was huge. And so people think like, in the 12-step program, you're supposed to ask for forgiveness. Like, I'm not a big fan of that. Will you forgive me? No, I don't believe in that. I'm like, I'm going to forgive you so that I don't carry anything about what you did to me. It's
So
for
I
me.
just want to say I want to talk about this, Frank, because like
Yeah.
honestly, you're the psychiatrist, you're the psychotherapist. I need some help.
Yeah.
So what if, and I know there's listeners here that are in the same boat.
Yes.
What if you're in a relationship with somebody that is continually still hurting you?
Yes. Yeah.
And okay, I'm no longer married to this man, but it's like, trust me, it's still happening. It's like the behavior
Forgiveness
is
is,
still prevalent. It's like, and I'm like, what am I forgiving? It's like, no. And
yeah,
because
that's
trust
right.
me, I'm a forgiver. Like I'm a loving human being. And
Here's
I'm
the
going
thing they
like, I
say.
actually feel like, I feel like forgiveness in like,
Yeah.
there's a readiness, but not only that, a willingness. I get
Yeah.
it. And I've been praying about this too, because I'm a very, like,
You got it.
I've got it.
Yeah.
So
Here's what I'll say
no,
about that.
I'm not there yet. And
Yeah.
it's like,
When you're
so it's
actively
protection.
being abused, that's right. Protection. When you're actively in a difficult situation, it's not safe to forgive because you're still in some ways attached to this person. Okay.
Yes. And
So it
probably will be
makes you
for,
too
yeah,
vulnerable. It makes you too vulnerable. So I'm not saying everybody has to forgive to heal trauma. That's not what I'm
no,
saying. I'm
no.
saying if you are in a place Like I remember I remember when I stood up to my father for the first time in my life. I was downtown in Chicago when I was in medical school and he was back in Oakland. And I stood up to him. I'm like, I'm not coming home and working for the summer and I'm going to get
He wanted you
married.
to clean all the liquor
He wanted
bottles,
me to
right?
clean all the, I'm like,
For the summer.
I'm in medical school. I'm not cleaning liquor bottles anymore. Like, hire a 16-year-old to do that. Like, not me. And it was the first time I said no. And he was enraged, but I had a level of independence. I wasn't living at home where I was going to get beaten
Mhm.
in that moment. I'm like, I can get in a car and drive away. You are far away from me. You can't hurt me. I can support myself. I don't even need your money. So you have to have
Hmm.
a level of safety in order to be able to forgive. If you're still beholden in a way that is abusive and traumatizing, forgiveness may not be the right answer at that point.
But the fourth step is
Take
releasing,
back your power. After you release,
taking back your
it's
power.
taking back your power and you live in the world differently. You make choices.
Oh, I know that I'm in my power
Yeah.
for sure.
See, like that, it's like, and that's the living life differently thing that a
Hmm.
lot of psychotherapy does not talk about. It's like, heal your trauma, good, you're good to go. It's like, no, you actually have to start living differently, and it's very difficult to do that. I'm still doing it,
Oh,
you know.
it's a lifelong
Yeah. Yeah.
journey.
Yeah.
We are
It's a,
not going to be healed 100%.
yeah,
It's not about that.
I don't want people to get too hung up on the forgiveness thing. I want to go back to it for a second. Like if it doesn't feel right to you, some people will say that sexual violation, like I will never forgive that person. I'm like, well, okay, that's fine. Like you
Exactly,
don't have
because that person
yeah,
did like, and they're a violator of
yeah,
like all things sacred. And it's just
yeah.
like, F no. Like,
Okay. If
I
you
agree.
don't want to, it's okay. The thing that I say is there was freedom for me to no longer be tethered to this person because I let go of the feelings I had towards him. What his feelings were towards me, I don't even care. Like, that's not relevant for me. It's more like I'm no longer feeling this. It
Right.
was interesting. This one person that I've
Hmm.
talked about recently that I was just like, it's not good to have this person in my life. I don't, it's not healthy for me. I just was kind of in my old way, I just was not responding. Like I would be just like like be silent instead of speaking up.
Hmm.
That's my old way. It's like if you're hurt, get small. If you're hurt, become invisible, right? And so I saw myself doing some of that and I was like, Frank, that's not okay. If you don't want this person in your life in a loving way, you can say, I don't want this relationship anymore. And so I did. Like I was like the right thing to because my old way is just be invisible.
Right.
And I was like, that's the old way. The new way is I don't need to be mean. I can be kind, but I can be clear. It's like, look, I need a break from this relationship. This is not working for me. And I wanted to let you know I wish you the best. So I stated it. Like I said, this is over for me. You know what I mean? And that was really important. And if I did that as a kid, if I said that to my father, he would beat the shit out of me. You know what I mean? This person's not going to beat the shit out of me. They're not my father. But I also need to show up differently.
Mm.
And that's a piece of what I really want to teach people. There is the therapy work and there's the life work.
Yeah. 100%. I I've done so much therapy,
Right.
and I'm showing up differently in so many ways.
Yes.
And my
Yes.
life is a reflection of that. I
Yeah.
have I have beautiful relationships with my friends.
Yeah.
I've got an amazing partnership now. Like
Yeah.
the man that I'm with, it's like
Yeah.
is teaching me more things about myself than I can imagine. But I'm being different in this relationship than I was in
Yes.
other, right?
Yeah. That's
So
that's
it's
so
like your life
important.
is a reflection of your
Yes.
learning, a
100%.
different level. So
100%. That's right. Right? You attract where you're at. You
yeah.
attract where you're at.
So I love you, Frank Anderson. You're awesome. Thank you
Thank
so,
you.
so much for being with us today
Yeah.
on Let's Talk Love. And
Yeah.
I just like, you're such a great teacher. And I loved your book, To Be Loved. I hope
Thank
everybody reads it because it was so raw and authentic. There's also so many lessons for all of us in it.
Yeah.
And you're doing tremendous work in the world. So I
Yeah.
thank you so much for everything and your time today.
Thank you. And I really enjoyed our connection too. I really did. And thank you for what you're doing. Because, if we're going to make a difference in this world, it's going to be a collective. It's not one person. So thank you for all that you're doing also. And I
It
appreciate
is
it.
a collective. It is a
Yeah.
collective
It's
effort.
a
That's for
collective.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're here for each other, right?
You got it. That's
Thank you,
right.
Dr. Frank Anderson.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for being here with us. Let's Talk Love is brought to you by Real Love Ready and hosted by Robin Ducharme. If you'd like to keep learning with us, visit realloveready.com for more resources and tools to boost your relational skills and get better at love. If this podcast has resonated with you, it would mean the world to us if you could take just 30 seconds to do these 3 things. Follow or subscribe. Never miss an episode by hitting the follow or subscribe button wherever you listen to your podcasts, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite app. This makes sure new episodes show up automatically for you, and it helps us get more visibility so more people can find our show. Leave a rating and review. Your feedback means everything to us. By leaving a 5-star rating and a thoughtful review, you're not only showing your support, but also helping others discover the podcast. Share an episode that really spoke to you with someone in your life, whether it's a friend, partner, or family member. Your recommendation could just be what they need to hear. We at Real Love Ready acknowledge and express gratitude for the Coast Salish people, the stewards of the land on which we work and play, and encourage you to take a moment to acknowledge and express gratitude for those that have stewarded and continue to steward the land that you live on as well. Many blessings and much love.